A study published in the journal Frontiers in Public Health in May 2020 probes the possibility that insulin resistance may determine the severity of COVID-19 infections. Now let's discuss this potential interaction. So to join me in studio for the discussion is our regular Dr. Paolo. Welcome back, good to have you here.
Thank you, thank you.
Paolo, let's start maybe with the idea of what insulin resistance actually is.
All right, so in the normal process of things, glucose travels in the bloodstream, and in order for it to enter cells in the tissue, insulin must be present. Imagine there's a door on the cell wall, insulin is the key, it opens the door and glucose gets in. Actually, insulin promotes the appearance of transporters, glucose transporters at the cell wall, which then transport the glucose in.
Right.
So insulin resistance basically begins to occur when the cell is not sensitive to the insulin, so it doesn't respond to the key.
Right.
It's like having the wrong key for the lock.
For the door, yeah.
So the door doesn't open, so the glucose does not go in.
Okay.
The two normal consequences to that is that the glucose remains in the bloodstream, and so does the insulin. So that is why blood sugar goes up, and so does blood insulin. Those are the immediate sort of consequences. This kind of scenario is common in metabolic diseases, such as the metabolic syndrome, diabetes type 2. That is what insulin resistance is all about. One very important thing to remember is that it creates an inflammatory environment within the body. We need to remember that for what we're going to be talking about.
Right. So now, in terms of that, so it creates an inflammatory environment, but what would be the indicators that somebody might be suffering from insulin resistance?
Right. So there is something known as the insulin resistance syndrome, which is composed of high blood pressure, high cholesterol levels, and obesity.
Okay.
All right? And obesity has different meanings, so I would say anyone who's overweight.
Overweight.
Okay, so those three things constitute what is known as insulin resistance syndrome. So if those are together, it is likely that there is insulin resistance at work.
Okay.
So remember, insulin resistance happens before a disease such as diabetes type 2 or metabolic syndrome can actually be pronounced.
Okay.
Then there are a couple of telltale signs that can potentially point to the presence of insulin resistance, and those include what is known as acanthosis nigricans, which is basically the dark pigmentation of skin in skin folds, armpits, neck, and in the groin. It's darker pigmentation, okay, that's a telltale sign. Skin tags, little skin tags on the skin. In women, male pattern baldness, as well as hirsutism. So in other words, the growth of facial hair.
Right.
Acne can also point to it.
Okay. Yeah. So now what would be the influencing factor or the I suppose the determining factor of insulin resistance and COVID-19 infections and the severity thereof?
All right, that's a semester course at university. So let's try to do it in a few minutes. We have a system known as the RAAS system, RAAS. Renin, angiotensin, aldosterone system.
Okay.
Right. One of its main functions is to elevate blood pressure when blood pressure drops. There are many reasons for blood pressure dropping. This system will be activated, and what it does is it takes a substance from the kidneys called renin, it then changes it into other substances. Eventually it becomes angiotensin 2. That substance changes into aldosterone, and those two substances then cause vasoconstriction, cause the vessels to constrict, therefore increasing the resistance and elevating blood pressure. They also cause the retention of water and minerals by the kidneys, again filling the pipes, the circulatory system, increasing blood pressure. So we're all fine here, that's a standard process. Now, this system can also be activated by other issues, other than low blood pressure. Inflammation, for example. Now, we were speaking about inflammation.
Yes.
Now, insulin resistance itself activates the system, and so does the inflammation that insulin resistance causes.
So it's a double whammy in a sense.
Correct. So now this system gets activated. Now, your blood pressure is fine. The system is now activated. So if your body does nothing, your blood pressure is going to go through the roof. And it does in many people, and it leads to cardiovascular disease, even strokes.
Right.
But so what the body does is the following. When angiotensin 2, remember, one of the two lost products, is in greater supply than that is needed, so it's causing blood pressure to become very high, then the body expresses in various cells a protein called ACE2, A-C-E, like an ace. ACE2, especially and many of these cells are in the lungs. It expresses this protein because this protein changes angiotensin 2 it degrades it into angiotensin 1-7. So in other words, it stops that effect, all right? Because angiotensin 2 and aldosterone also change the way that insulin works on cells. So it's sort of a vicious cycle.
Okay.
So if angiotensin 2 is being produced and not needed for normal purposes, such as increasing blood pressure, then the body expresses ACE2 so that ACE2 can change angiotensin, degrade it. Now, SARS-CoV-2, which is the official name of the COVID-19 virus, gains entry to target cells via ACE2.
Ah, okay.
You must have read something about it.
Yes.
So, what happens in an insulin-resistant state is that you've got more cells expressing ACE2. So there are more cells in the lungs for the virus to connect to.
Right, right.
Now, that's the first challenge. Then, because it has occupied those proteins, now those proteins can't degrade angiotensin 2.
Okay.
Which is why they were there in the first place.
Yes, absolutely.
So angiotensin 2 continues to elevate blood pressure and continues to dysregulate glucose and lipid and carbohydrate metabolism.
Okay.
So the insulin resistance worsens.
Right.
So it's a double whammy again.
Yep, and that cycle just continues.
Correct. So that's basically the connection.
Okay.
So the virus uses a protein that the body normally produces to fix a dysfunction. It kind of uses its spike, kind of connects to that protein, and in a simple way, the protein takes it into the cell.
Fascinating, because I mean, we've all heard that diabetes is a comorbidity of COVID-19,
yes.
but that insulin resistance, it's fascinating to get clarity on how these things interact with each other. But now, I mean, obviously, primarily what we're aiming here is to help people understand insulin resistance and also how they can manage it or reduce it or eliminate it. So what would the lifestyle factors be that could have an impact on insulin resistance?
Right, weight loss is the very first one.
Yeah.
Okay, because most people with insulin resistance will be overweight to some degree. So weight loss, sleeping well, sleeping sufficiently, reducing stress, obviously. Okay. In terms of diet, you reduce carbohydrates and you reduce sugar intake.
Okay.
Because that sugar is sugar, glucose, carbohydrates get changed into glucose. You should increase the amount of vegetables that one eats. Green tea is very, very good.
Yes.
Cinnamon is also very good, and as well as many herbs and spices. Okay, so make the food spicier.
Okay.
All right. And basically, eating wholesome, healthy, natural foods. All right. Foods that don't. One of the issues with the production of, or the excess production of angiotensin, for example, is that it leads to oxidative stress. It causes free radicals. And free radicals damage cells in a way that induce insulin resistance.
Okay.
See, remember, it's never a simple way. It's never just one factor. There are a whole lot of factors. Because everything in the body, in a sense, it's as if if you have to zoom in, you see many unique individual programs. But as you zoom out, they're all connected in some way.
Those programs are connected.
They're all connected in some way. So when we discuss things, we're discussing it in an exceedingly simplistic way.
Yes, but it's so we can get a sense of things and build that bigger picture over time, potentially.
So basically, in terms of lifestyle, it's what we should all be doing.
Yep, the standard health procedure, really.
So as soon as one knows that there may be signs of insulin resistance, one should do things to bring insulin and glucose metabolism into the area where it should be.
Right.
And if one is already insulin resistant, or if one has been diagnosed with diabetes type 2, for example, then liver disease also leads to insulin resistance, all sorts of liver disease.
Right.
So one should do something about it.
Okay. Now, Doc, I read in the journal Annals of Hepatology in August 2020 that silymarin is an ally against insulin resistance. Now, silymarin is obtained from milk thistle, and again, you mentioned liver just a moment ago, and there's a very strong correlation there. And it's been used principally for liver detoxification for centuries, really. But now, how does this improve insulin resistance?
All right, so what they've done in many clinical trials, they've used patients with diabetes type 2, with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease, with cirrhosis of the liver, and diabetes type, hepatitis C. All right, so these are all patients with confirmed insulin resistance.
Right.
They've then undergone clinical trials and taken milk thistle. Okay, and the results are that milk thistle improves the insulin sensitivity of the cell, so it reduces insulin resistance. Okay, and in doing that, Obviously, it reduces insulin levels in the body, it reduces glucose levels, and it upgrades the functioning of the systems that metabolize carbohydrates, lipids, and the food that we eat.
So what other functions would this silymarin, it's quite a tongue twister there, have in the body, like coming from milk thistle as a sort of a supplement?
All right. It is highly, highly effective for many liver conditions, which includes hepatitis B and C, with non-alcoholic fatty liver disease as well as alcoholic fatty liver disease. It is very efficient in detoxification of toxins. All right. People that have iron overload, where the liver is also implicated. Patients on chemotherapy, for the side effects of the chemotherapy, because again the liver is being taxed. The liver has got to break down all the chemotherapy that is being received. So it's also effective for acne and also for diabetes.
Great stuff. Well, thank you so much. Great to have a slightly different discussion around milk thistle, because it's very interesting information.